Okay, so welcome to Work It Out Debate. Today's core proposition is that taxation is theft, with ASY advocating for and MasterAretosis contending against. So the advocate's job is to put forward an argument that they believe establishes the truth of the core proposition, while the contender's responsibility is showing that the presented argument fails to justify the core proposition, not to show that it's conclusively false. So in the scope of our debate, we're only going to talk about that one topic and the argument, and after a half hour, we'll see whether or not we've reached an agreement. So ASY, please feel free to take 2 or 3 minutes to explain your argument for the proposition, and then you guys can just jump into the free-form discussion. You guys both know the rules about what you're not allowed to do, which is interrupting and insulting and stuff like that. So I'll trust it to you guys to stay within the boundaries. All right.
Okay. I affirm taxation is theft. Theft is simply the taking without consent of another's property. The state or any other entity engaging in taxation may argue that does not define it as theft. But because ethics are universal, we must derive our justification for the permitted taking of property, in this instance, taxation, from somewhere other than the relatively recent and subjective structure of taxation as implemented by governments. We can derive the right of property from the following in any situation as an ethic. A person is the owner of his/her own body. A person owns every scarce nature-given good that he/she has put to use by means of his/her own body before anyone else. She is known as the concept of original appropriation. A person owns all new products that he/she has created through original appropriated goods or their own body, provided the property of others was not damaged during the production process. Finally, ownership of goods that have either been originally appropriated or produced can only be transferred from the previous owner to the latter owner by means of a voluntary contractual agreement. Taxation is theft because the government or another entity posits that it can take your property without your explicit consent. Justified property claims can only be derived from first acquisition or voluntary exchange. By affirming the ethical ability to tax, not only does one affirm the lack of any property rights at all, but they cannot argue against any amount of infringement on their property rights. Their clothes could be stolen off their back in the street by the entity positing a positive benefit for them or a non-explicit contractual agreement, and they could not object. And that would be my reason why taxation is theft.
All right. Thanks very much, and feel free to jump into the free-form
Sure.
discussion now. And
Yeah, I
Master
didn't know we were
Eratosis, you
gonna
can
read
start
off
your
a script of
cross-examination.
like Liquid Zulu property rights bullshit, but that's not an insult. Sorry. So, but I'm gonna go with this take with my argument is basically taxation is theft only would be true under two conditions. Either you are illegally taking something by law, or you are taking something immorally. Those would be the two conditions where we say something is theft, wrongful taking of something. You've already concede that under the legal structure, taxation is um, legal, even though you're going to redefine what legal means in order to suit your view. But under any government system, taxation is going to be on the law code. And two, now you have to show that it's immoral. And in order to do that, you're going to try to take it to the NAP principle and show that it's against the NAP. So what I would argue in that realm would be that taxation actually is rendering for services given to you, and in fact, it's not is not aggression upon the person because you are not the original appropriator of the society or the infrastructure in which you're paying for the taxes to use.
Okay, are you done with your statement?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, you said that we have to decide if it's illegal or immoral. I already mentioned in my constructive that taxation is legally permitted in plenty of structures, but that doesn't mean it's not theft. We still have to derive like an actual ethical position saying it's permitted behavior. So my response to that would simply be that there is no position that could justify one person taking from another for their supposed benefit, but not vice versa. So taxation would still be unjustified and be theft in that instance, even if the legal body says otherwise.
I want to
You
pause you
also said,
there may I pause you there because not all taxation is taking from one person to the benefit of another. Oftentimes you're being rendering back services that have been given to you. Not all taxation is welfare. You're
sure,
acting as
sure. I mean, what it doesn't change anything. Like, still, that you still wouldn't be able to explain or derive
Well,
from any kind of
just
ethical
argue that
position.
you're not justified in taking from one person to give to another, but not all taxation does that. So you can't use
That's
that.
not the crux of my argument at all. So what I'm
What was
saying
the
is you
crux
can't
of the
say that
argument?
one person has the right to reallocate resources to anybody, regardless of the reason, from another person, and then say that another person can't. That's my argument. It doesn't matter where the money's going. I'm just saying that if you support taxation, you'd have to explain why everybody in society has the right to reallocate other people's resources for their own benefit or for other people's benefit.
What's for the benefit of everyone, usually.
Right, but taxation isn't like when something is a right, when people can do something and it's not theft, when it's a permitted action, everybody would be able to do it. So if that was true with taxation, we could literally have no other rights because as I said in my opening statement, someone could just come up to you in the street and say that it would benefit society for you to be naked and take your clothes, and you couldn't object to that.
No, so your notion relies on a very specific view of what a right is. You're relying on this natural right, NAP view of rights. But what I view as a right is simply a heuristic that society sets up for a system, and um, whether that right is, uh, I guess, moral or not is up to the content of the society, but not necessarily just because it's immoral doesn't mean it's not a right that you have within that society. Legal structure
Well, I
is
mean,
what.
when you say a right is set up by a system, a result of a system, you're talking about privileges, right? We can actually derive rights in any situation, and that's why we consider them quote unquote natural. And rights have to be universal. This isn't just a natural law position. I mean, since Kant came around with the categorical imperative, and even before that, obviously, if you're talking about what permitted human action is, it has to be the same case for everybody. So rights have to be universal, and they are not in the context of what structures allow in a society.
Well, taxation is universal, so there's no
That's not true.
specific infringement. Yes, it is.
I
Everyone is
can't tax
taxed.
you.
Well, the state taxes you, but everyone is
The state's not a person.
equally. Well, okay, so that's a separate question because now you're going to go into this ANCAP ontology that we
You
also
mean
don't have time.
ontology? Who is the state? Can the state have rights? Can a group of people have rights,
The
or do
state doesn't
people have
exist. You're
rights?
saying the state doesn't exist as an individual, right? That's an ontology. Saying the state is
Uh,
I don't know, an ideal or something.
a state is a social organization. It's not an individual,
Yeah.
obviously,
It's an
unless
organization that is given the right to tax people.
an organization that's given the right to taxing. But we're talking about ethics, though. I mean, that how can a how can
I'm
a
talking about
group of
ethics too,
people
right?
or
So
like
I
a
know that
social structure have
for example, I'll
rights?
give you an example of one state. So when the United States formed, the different colonies voted for representatives. They crafted a constitution under a legal system. All the states ratified it. Under the code, it says the state has the right to taxation explicitly. Congress has the right to tax.
Wait, are you
So
positing the
and then that was
constitution?
reaffirmed in later amendments that the income tax was also a legal right. So what you're saying is, if a group of people decides it, then now, in, for all future generations that are under that system, they would have to like reaffirm that original charter or something.
Are you citing the Constitution as proof that states can
No,
have
I'm giving
rights?
you one example of a system that where taxation is legal, and that is one that I know because I'm from the United States. There you go.
Okay, but I've already said it doesn't matter if it's legal in the context of the structure. Like you'd have to explain why it's
I'm asking
universally
you to tell me
applicable
what's
when we're talking
immoral
about
about the
ethics.
Constitution that I just gave you. What's immoral about it?
About the Constitution, like what aspect of it? It feels like we're getting off topic.
Taxation section, the part that I'm talking about.
But even the Bill of Rights specifically says that we have natural rights that shall not be infringed. So if you're citing the Constitution as a document of like why status or positivist legality is legitimate, you're contradicting yourself because it
I'm
explicitly
not. You're
enshrines
not
natural
following. No,
law.
listen. You're not tracking the argument. I'm asking you to tell me what is the immoral part of that contractual system. You're not
Of
doing
what
that.
contractual system? It's
Instead, you're trying
theft.
to flip it on me and ask me why I'm using it as proof, which is not what I'm doing. I'm asking you to show me why it's not moral.
What? Why is it not moral? Because it's theft. It's unconsensual taking from another
Well, now
person.
you're just asserting your conclusion. Can you say
That's why it's
why it's
immoral.
immoral? Why is it theft? Because theft means
But
it's immoral already.
because it
Redundant.
violates your property rights. You can steal from another
A
person.
property right. Under the Constitution, for example, it says that I or Congress can tax me. So where is it illegal for the Constitution to do, or sorry, immoral for the Constitution to do that?
First of all, the Constitution and governments aren't people, so they can't
No,
have
I'm asking
rights.
you, why is it immoral for the Constitution to take the to tax you? Why
Why
is that?
isn't in the Constitution
Without
taxes
you just
people?
saying taxation is theft again, because that's what you keep doing.
Okay, so I'm very confused. What are you saying? Why is taxation bad, or why is it
I'm
immoral that the
asking you why you
Constitution says it's
cannot set
bad?
up a charter or a constitution that sets up certain rights for the state. Why can we not do that? Why is that immoral?
So Constitution, well, I mean, you could do that, but like the state itself is immoral. I don't really want to
Okay, but
talk about
why?
the Constitution in the
I'm asking
context
you
of this
why.
debate.
I'm asking you why it's not moral. You're not just
Why
saying
is
that
it immoral for a state? Because you're imposing a system of governance upon people in a geographic region and you're creating a
you're
monopoly of
imposing it.
force through violence.
They not have a ratification process, and they have representatives for every single state, or I guess colony at the time.
Well, actually, not every single colony ratified the Constitution
So they did.
immediately.
All of
There's a
them
lot of debate
ratified
on
it.
it.
Yes, all of them ratified it.
Every single person in the country did not ratify the Constitution. There
Every
was plenty of
colony
individuals that
ratified
were
it, and every
opposed to
colony
it.
had representatives for the people. So are you against representationalism?
Yeah, obviously, I'm against democracy
Okay. So what's wrong with democracy then?
because it's majority rule. There was a sizable minority of people, especially in states like New York, that elected federalist representatives, and basically they went and they betrayed their own constituents sometimes explicitly. But even if they didn't, the minority was still trampled.
So the agreement, for example, in this situation, is that the when you enter into a political process, the loser agrees to accept the judgment of the winner. Otherwise, they wouldn't have ratified it to begin with. That's what a political process is.
Okay, you're explaining what it is. It doesn't mean it's justified.
It's consensual, though. So your problem is if it's not consensual, and it's immoral, but it is consensual, regardless of whether they won their position or not.
What? So you're saying that it's consensual because I mean there's people like at this time that probably had no involvement in the political process at all and were still
It's
taxed
their
following
problem
it.
for not being involved in it. They had the
Okay, so
opportunity.
like I mean in the 1700s, who could even vote? Who was even involved in this process?
Property owners.
Who?
It'll be property owners.
What kind of property owners? Because in North Carolina, there's like even in states that had freed slaves, they couldn't vote.
Well, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the ratification process. So,
What about indigenous people that were there
well,
before? Why are they being imposed
well, they're
upon
not being.
Federalist
No,
law?
we're not talking about that. We're trying to isolate the specific immorality of it, right? Because we could
The
always do.
immoralities are
What
imposing it
about
upon a
the indigenous
geographical
people
region.
before it? Like you, for example, under your system, I could also make the same exact argument. What about the indigenous people that got their land taken away and got sold to other people and eventually came down to you, right? Either way, you can do that. So let's ignore that. That's a
Uh-huh.
problem for both systems.
But you're saying that when the Constitution was formed, everybody consented to it, basically, which just isn't true. When you have groups of people that were there already that actively did not want to be part of our governing structure at all, you have minority groups
No,
that
I'm
are
saying that
actively against the
I'm saying that
Constitution.
all stakeholders that had property got together and made it, which is what your exact system is.
It's not true. Not all stakeholders
Okay,
that
so
had property were
that's
involved in the
because
constitutional process.
your NAP
Why, I don't know
system.
why we're talking about this. I don't think it's relevant.
It is relevant. So, like under your NAP system, where property is transferred through consent, do we have to now give back all the property up to this point that has been taken by violence or theft in the past? Yes or no?
Yeah, there would be a process and it might have to be given back.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to give everything back to everyone, redistribute everyone.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
Okay, but you already said redistribution was wrong earlier, so now you're contradicting.
When did I say redistribution was wrong?
You were talking about taxes. You said you cannot take and redistribute for someone unconsensually at the very beginning. That was one of your first
I
problems with
never
taxes.
said it was anything. Okay, when you have stolen property, you don't have a right to that property. So if I have property I actually like got through voluntary exchange, then I would be able to object to that. So I'm
Unconsensual
very confused by your
reallocation,
claim.
which is redistribution, exactly. So
I am not
un,
advocating for redistribution of ethically owned property. I'm advocating for the return of stolen goods and land.
okay, but under your argument, all this land was stolen from Native Americans, so everyone in the United States would have to be reallocated.
That's not true. Not all of the land in the United States was claimed by indigenous people. There's
How are
still
you going
parts
to
of the country
how
today
are you
that
going
are
to
wild.
adjudicate what was claimed by them and what was not? Then about that
We
whole
have an
system.
entire school of thought called anthropology, and there's experts that go to court cases today and establish Native American property rights. So even in the status quo, there's an entire, academic school, and there's experts that make a living off of adjudicating indigenous people's rights and supporting their property.
Yeah, but a
So
majority of that property still would be with people now who have gotten their property consensually, and you would have to redistribute it back to people, different
I,
stakeholders.
I, I still feel like this is very off topic.
Not off topic at
But
all. You're trying to use
so
one
if
perception
you
of your
steal a
property.
bike from me and I come back and I say, and you steal a bike from me and then you sell it to like Moderator or Lego, and then I tell the police, what are they going to do? They're going to give me my bike back because purchasing stolen
Yeah, but that's
property is
not what you're
still
saying.
wrong.
So now you're using a stupid like disanalogy. So what I'm saying is,
Stupid.
if your great grandfather stole a bike and then I bought that bike from Lego legally, like 3 generations later, and obviously I'm not going to give that bike back to you just because your great grandfather had it stolen from them.
Well, if it happened with my great grandfather, I mean, like if we're pragmatically implementing a redistribution of like stolen land, like you probably won't actually have sufficient proof to indicate it was stolen or who owned it. So it
So
wouldn't
as a
really be a
cop out,
problem in
right?
that situation. It's not
Then
a
this is
cop
why
out.
going back to my original point, which you tried to dismiss by using the Native Americans, but you were disingenuous because now when it's brought against your
Disingenuous.
system, you're like, oh, we have a way to adjudicate it; it won't be a big deal. So you're just creating ideal land for yourself. Wipe away the
Ideal
problems
land.
for you, but not for me. Right?
Huh? Do
An
you, I
ideal land.
mean,
You're saying like, oh, we
at
all have a
least
way
if
to
like
do it.
if people like there could be situations where people can demonstrate like the specific families or claimants of land that was stolen and they should have their land back, obviously.
Regardless of if the people now had bought that land through a legal process that was consensual.
Um that's so yeah, I guess like currently they
So you
bought
would
that
read this.
land, but it's still stolen land. So if they can be proved it's stolen, then they don't have a claim to that
Okay,
property.
so you're for
They should be
redistribution.
refunded as well, actually.
You're for reallocation.
Not for reallocation universally, but in this instance, yeah.
Reallocation to correct for a previous rights infringement, right?
I believe that there should be restitution for damages and that we should make sure that people actually own what they have. Yeah.
You would reallocate. You would redistribute based off of what those claims were, right?
If they're sufficient, like a court could, yeah.
Okay. So then I think that another problem with your system is that now that you've accepted redistribution of reallocation, the opponent can now say, well, taxation is a way of reallocating historical injustices through a redistribution plan.
Okay. But taxation of property that isn't mine isn't stealing from me, right? Like
We
if
don't
I
know.
have stolen
We have to go
resources,
through. We have to go through and adjudicate all this land now and see if you have generational stolen wealth. Apparently, because that's your position.
well, if there's a victim that comes forward, like we should look into it. Yeah, but obviously
Our victims
that wouldn't
coming forward.
justify taxation. That would justify actually like per individual cases and like restitution. That's a completely different concept.
No, so if let's say like 90% of the land was taken through like violence and theft, which I'm sure you would agree with, right? So then the best way to do that would be redistribute it to everyone equally, because we have no way to understand every specific grievance through the process, right? So I don't see how you
No,
cannot justify taxation through your system.
no, I don't agree with that at all. I think you'd have to prove for each individual plot of land who owned it.
Do you think most of this country, or well, it doesn't matter this country, but most states were established through violence and theft?
I think most states are established by violence and theft. I don't know if a majority of like private property is specifically on like something that was important or like owned by indigenous people. A lot of it might be, but
Probably like, okay, so let's say Massachusetts.
okay.
It's like 100% land taken from Native Americans that had claims to it, right?
Well, it's difficult to know because before the settlers came, there was like a very large drop in population in the New World, and there was a lot of villages that were abandoned before the pilgrims arrived and stuff. So we don't like this is why it would be so important to go by a case by case basis because there was population centers in New England, but there's also a lot of areas that were relatively empty. So we it would you can't just make like broad claims like Massachusetts, like all that was settled. Like at one point it was, but if no one's living there and it's abandoned before pilgrims came there, like these would be things we'd have to establish within court cases.
All right. So then you would be for redistributing land through court cases, and so basically just an inefficient version of taxation.
This isn't taxation at all. This is restitution. And it's not brought by the state, it would be brought by the victim, right? The person isn't positing they have a right to take resources from other people. They're positing they have a right to return stolen resources to themselves.
Is what the generally the argument for welfare would be that you are redistributing based on like historical injustices or societal injustices. So to me, you're making almost the same exact argument. You just want to do it through a court rather than through a legislative body.
No, I'm making a completely different argument. I want it to be individual based and actually account for nuance of like different pieces of land and be brought about by the victims and actually address their concerns and address their merit instead of being derived from legislative or positivist legal considerations.
The positivist doesn't really matter here. We're just trying to decide whether these two are analogous. Is taxation analogous to your redistribution plan that you have?
No, it's absolutely not, because taxation is proposing that the government or another actor has a right to take property that you own, where my plan is that you have a right to reclaim property that you own.
So you're just the only thing that you're changing is who the redistribution goes to or what the mechanism
The thing
is.
is, like you can see in my opening statement, I explained to you like how you can justly come to own
I'm learning a
property,
lot from
right?
this.
Part of that
I'm
is
asking.
like
Lots
if
of
you're
notes.
engaging in exchange, it either has to be from the original claimant or it has to be someone that voluntarily exchanged with the original
But
claimant
then
and so
you
on. So if
then
you're
you
not,
introduce this other. So you introduce this other principle was, which is if there is an injustice somewhere in the chain of transactions, every transaction after that injustice is also unjust. So now we have to go back and figure out whether all of these transactions originate from an unjust, which you said they did, because you said all states originate through violence and theft, so all states are illegitimate. States are the ones that enforce these property rights, so now all these transactions are illegitimate. Now we have to redistribute.
it's a pretty big link chain. But I would say that we would have to look critically upon a lot of different transactions. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with saying that.
So it'd be all of them, yeah. Going back to
All
when
of
this
them.
the state is the one that's enforcing these property rights. You don't believe in any rights that the state grants because the state is, I guess, a positivist, non-universal system of ethics, and so all laws from the state are illegitimate. And so now everything down that chain is illegitimate.
Oh, I don't actually believe all private property that exists under the state is illegitimate. Usually it's done through like voluntary contract when you exchange property titles. So the state could be the safeguarder of that property. And in some exceptions, that might actually be directly selling you the property. But we still have to actually derive like somebody that what like the property was stolen from for it to be like adjudicated in my court system or in my ethical system.
And you
But I
could,
think we're
as
getting
you
pretty
said,
far away from taxation
but
here. Like,
well, we're getting far from taxation because your whole, I mean, first of all, you're the one that got off taxation from the very start. You're
no.
saying yes because you have to give this entire worldview in half an hour in order to explain your system, rather than
I
arguing
don't
like
need to
a
explain my
direct.
system. I'm not positing an explanation of how I want
Yes,
to
your
like
whole taxation is
provide
theft.
services to people or anything.
Taxation is theft under your view only if you accept your definition of law and your definition of what's ethical, right? But there's
Well,
arguments for
actually,
taxation is
taxation is
theft.
theft because you're taking people's property without consent. That's my definition. I'm explaining to you why we have to
But
prefer,
that's not the
like, we can't
definition
allow
of
status
theft, right?
definitions.
That's your definition of theft.
What is the definition of theft according to you?
I would say it's the illegal or the unethical taking of something, and you have to
Okay,
establish.
I did establish this why I provide you the ethical system.
You you didn't establish anything. You just established that you believe that it's theft. That's all you've done.
True. I have, you can read my opening remarks and you can see how we
No,
do come
so you
about
said we're
owning
getting far
property.
from taxation, but then your view that taxation is theft relies on you arguing for a natural law
Well,
system of
you
ethics.
asked me to justify why taxation is unethical, and I did fulfill
But
that
I'm saying
burden.
you're saying I'm getting far from it. But when I'm trying to address your uh, natural law theory, now you're saying
Because of
um,
actually,
you're
instead of
getting far
explaining
away from
why
taxation
natural
is
law
theft.
theory doesn't apply to taxation, you're just saying like, well,
I
doesn't
offered these
natural
for
law
all.
theory apply to this? It's kind
I
of
did two
unrelated.
things. I said I tried to one show that the positive framework was not unconsensual, so by your own NAP it wouldn't be a
Well,
problem. And then
I don't think
two,
you
I tried to
demonstrated
show,
that
and
at
then
all.
two, I tried to show that even by your own principles, you would accept redistribution, which you said earlier taxation was redistribution, and that's why it was wrong. But then you seem to accept some kind of system that does the same exact thing, just in a different way.
Okay, well, I think it's a completely different topic. So I'm talking about restitution and like how we address legal concerns in my system. And I don't really think it's relevant. I just provided you an ethical system that shows that you have a right to your property and why you have a right to your property and what property you have a right to own. And I explained to you that taxation is not if you're to those principles. So unless you can convince me how it doesn't, that's fine. I don't think you sufficiently explain how we consented to taxation because it's like I said, not everybody can vote. There's people here that are subject to taxation that appear here before the instruction and have no right to vote. You're not allowed to participate at all. So I don't really think you can do those things. But if you like to explain why like taxation is not that would be interesting.
Well, just one last thing. So, I use my example. I was trying to
5 minutes, guys.
have you show where the reasoning was wrong with, for example, making a contract like a constitution for a government and then having people abide by those rules intergenerationally. You failed to do that. Instead, you attack the specific conditions of a specific constitution. We can make it hypothetical even and say, all right, everyone voted on it. There was no historical injustice in the creating of that system. Why is the future generation now not allowed to be taxed when everyone originally agreed on it? Now those people are born into that society, and then those next people are born into that society. Why would that be a problem?
Why would that be a problem? I mean, like, if your father or your parents signed a contract that doesn't bind you, right? Like you have your own individual agency, you own yourself, right? If I own myself, I can't, my parents, my forefathers, even if they were allowed to vote, which most of them weren't, that doesn't bind me to the Constitution. It doesn't bind me to any social contract. But I mean, I didn't go into it in depth because I think social contract theory is like a whole another debate. And I'm not really like making an argument like in my constructive about why taxation is bad related to social contract theory. I'm just
I don't
acknowledging that
think
it
I'm
is
really
theft.
making a social contract argument. I'm just using the word contract, but just literally just like let's say we chartered a city, right? You just that's not social contract theory. That's just how it comes about that you create a city.
Okay, but you still can't bind people and future generations to that. So even if people did, some people, a minority or like a slim majority of landowning white people that actually voted in 1789 decided that the federal government could tax, which by the way, I don't think the Constitution even allows federal taxation. Um, that would be
So the
cool, I
Constitution
guess, for them,
does allow for
but
federal taxation.
that was amended later. Originally, the federal government was funded
Okay, the
exclusively through
Constitution
fees
still
and
though. It
land
doesn't
sales.
matter whether it's amended or not.
I'm
Bill of
just
Rights.
saying, like, if your example is that these people all consented to taxation when they made it, like they didn't, and even when they did amend it, it's not like
It
everybody
gives
consented
Congress
to
the
it.
power to levy taxes. The income tax they made specifically an amendment because there was court challenges to it. But would they
They
argue that
could say they have the power to kill anybody they want, and that wouldn't mean they do. It would still mean it's wrong.
well, whether it's wrong and whether they have the power to do it are two different things.
Yeah,
Um,
in your own statement, you said taxation is either the immoral or illegal taking of something. So, I mean, I've
no, it's
demonstrated
not
why I think it's unethical. So,
under my theory because you to me you haven't proven that it's illegal because it's plainly legal. It's the law of the land. But if you
I've
still
already
think it's
accepted that as saying it doesn't matter.
if you think it's immoral, then you have to show why it's immoral. And your only thing is you're saying it's consensual, but that implies that you are that all governments are just inherently unconsensual, which I don't want to go into any specific theory against that. So then, how am I supposed to argue against it?
I'm just saying, like, where in my actual like property rights derivation would there be a justification for taxes? I'm curious because that's where I actually derive my ethical position. That's my entire crux of my argument is that regardless of what legality says about taxes, ethics say it's theft, and I provide you a derivation that explains to you why it's theft. So, do I contradict myself in my own writing here, or Like I'm
You
confused
did
on what the counter
contradict
argument is.
yourself if you say that taxation is wrong because it's redistribution, but then you promote a
That's not why
redistribution.
taxation is wrong. It's wrong because it's
That's what you
unconsensual.
said
I've
at the
never said
beginning,
it's
but if you
wrong
want to
with
drop what you
redistribution.
said, yeah, you did earlier, but
When
you can
what
ignore what
did
you
I
said.
said that like
It's one of the
reallocating
first things.
resources to other people without consent is wrong. Yes.
Yeah,
Great.
but then you're advocating for that though,
I'm advocating for the returnal of stolen resources. I think those are separate things. If
without
you
people's consent though. Yeah,
with oh okay, I mean if it's not your property, you don't have a right to it. That's why we have this entire like property
they were
system
under the
that I
impression it was
posit.
their right. It was their right to it when they bought it, and then you're saying, well, no, I have my own system of property that I'm now going to impose on you, and because
Well,
I
I'm
have the correct one, and then you're gonna unconsensually reallocate that land to other people. So I mean, you can make it paint however you want, but that's what you're doing.
I'm not gonna sit there and be like, well, tough shit, like the property you have was stolen like 8 generations ago and it's proven. I would say that they also deserve some kind of, money if the people that sold them the property like knowingly did it. Like
I
there
mean,
have to be there could still be room for restitution for both parties involved.
okay,
All right, so we're at the half-hour mark. So what we're going to do really quickly is I'm going to ask ASY and then MasterAretosis to restate their original argument and also to summarize their best understanding of their opponent's argument and why they think it fails. So ASY can do that, and then MasterAretosis. And then once that's done and we've sort of wrapped that up, you guys can decide amongst yourselves if you'd like us to continue for
So
another
my
20 minutes to
My
seek
original
a little
argument was
further
simply that
conclusion
theft
on the
is
matter.
taking without
So
consent of
ASY,
another's
please.
property. I explained in my constructive that I don't believe that what the government says regarding theft particularly matters, and that we should instead derive it from ethics. I derive it from, Lockean homesteading and persons the owner of their own body. They own scarce resources they interact with in their environment, and they can voluntarily exchange things, and people that exchange with them would have a right to that property, just as the original appropriator has. I think that still stands. I think taxation violates two of those because it posits that the government or a third party has a right to take people's property, which is untrue. And Aristotle's biggest arguments seem to basically boil down to the idea that somehow my system advocates for redistribution as well. I have no issue with redistribution if it's done, in a restorative way that is actually addressing like individual or like specific wrongs and is making up for them or returning what was stolen. But that isn't taxation because, as the definition of taxation is, the taking without consent of another's property, which has not really been argued against, that wouldn't actually be taxation because it's not your property in the first place if it was stolen from someone else at some point. And then their other argument seems to be that like people can naturally make like a town or a country and just live by those rules, and that's fine. Like whatever that could be true for some people, but you can't just impose on people not involved in the political process who actively want to lead the political process.
Okay, and then MasterAretosis, please just restate your rejection of the original core proposition, why his argument isn't justified, and
yeah,
then
my
just quickly
my
cover
2 points
why
were
you think his
one, his
rebuttals were insufficient.
argument was that taxation is theft because it's unconsensual. I say that you did not prove that it was unconsensual. And two, I argued that even if we accept his premises, then he still accepts similar arguments to what someone who justifying taxation would use, which is redistribution for past injustices. And since he accepts that redistribution plan, his view is also equally at fault as the taxation defender. And as far as what his argument was, I would say he would say taxation is theft because it's unconsensual, and it's unconsensual because he thinks all governments are unconsensual.
Gotcha. All right, well, thanks for the quick summary, guys. Next, all we need to decide is from this point, are we going to agree to disagree and leave it here?
I
Or do you
think
guys want
we
to
kind
go
of
for
wore out
one
each
final
other's
15 minutes from this
positions.
point?
It seems like we're at an impasse as to what each other are saying. So
Sure. Well, if you guys want, can we just quickly experiment and see if we can maybe run into like a 5 to 10 minute max question period and just see? I'll just read off if we have any questions. So if there's anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question, just quickly say who it's directed to in the question, and I'll read it out. And we'll see. And if that doesn't get very much attention, then
I'd be interested if
we'll
anybody
maybe
in the
call it there.
audience would want to kind of share what they think. If that's okay, moderator. But I would agree with Aristosis. I think we're probably good here. And Aristosis, if you want, like in the future, we can definitely talk more about like my view of retributive justice and stuff. But obviously, you're right in saying that it's kind of a whole big theory thing.
Yeah, if I knew it was only gonna be half an hour, I would have
Yeah, if we
engaged
had
more
more,
with with the ANCAP theory rather than that. But it's fine.
but if we had more time, like I definitely like think it could be applicable. Though, like, don't get me wrong.
So I would say generally when I'm arguing against taxation as theft, I'm arguing against like a Nozick view, which doesn't really require any principles beyond, I guess, liberal ones.
Mhm.
Hey, ASY, we got a question from the audience, and the question is, based on what can you
Well, based
prove
on
that
me
you can
transforming my
own
labor with
something
it, or
external to
having a
yourself?
contractual agreement showing I received it from someone that did, or as it goes down the line. So I could prove that I own like a car or something because I have a title that's signed off on by the previous owner. Or I can prove that I own like a bow because I made the bow, as examples.
Gotcha. MasterAretosis,
Uh,
do you have
I mean, we're just
anything
gonna
you'd
have
like to add to that?
competing views on what property is. I think property is just like a way to socially allocate scarce resources between people. I don't know if any specific system is more or less moral than others. It really depends on what people are proposing.
No, I would actually agree with you. That's the point of property. I think we just come to different conclusions. I mean, to me, I think private property is like has privacy.